If you joined me and Reds last night on the live stream, we discussed how we didn't ever want to be right about the things that we've been seeing. We wanted Mark Carney to succeed. We wanted him to implement and actually action things that he promised during the election. And well, we haven't got a whole lot of anything. In fact, things have only gotten worse. Unaffordability has increased considerably. Youth unemployment has increased. Unemployment has increased. And people are struggling to make ends meet worse than ever it was before he even got into power. And a lot of conversations have been happening about how we need to build infrastructure. We need to build pipelines. We need to build so that we can get our resources to other markets and stop being so reliant on one client. And Mark Carney made promises that he would do those things. He would get a deal with Donald Trump to get this whole thing figured out and get it sorted. That he would make things more affordable. He was going to be on top of making sure Canadians' lives were genuinely easier. That he was a man you hire in a crisis. Then we end up finding out today that the list of national projects has been unofficially released. CBC announced today that there are no new pipelines listed. We'll be discussing the details of all that. And as well as Doug Ford, still out to lunch. After dumping the Crown Royal, he went really quiet for a long time. Then he came back and said, hey, you kids, people who are struggling to get jobs, just look harder. That's Doug Ford for you in good old Ontario. That's what we're doing. That's how things are going. Welcome to the Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow, helps us to get to new audiences, and helps people see that there's something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, let's go into our first story, shall we? Due to some personal commitments and scheduling, I actually had to record this video a little earlier than I would usually do, so I didn't get to watch this whole press conference with Mark Carney. I only got to watch a little bit. And the whole start of it is he starts off by saying, we're in a crisis. Classic Mark Carney. We are in a crisis. Supply chains have been destroyed. Everything's upended. The Oilers haven't signed McDavid. He did say that. He literally said that as a bit of a joke to keep it light. And he goes on and talk about all the things that his government has done since they got new power. Well, we took out the consumer carbon tax. We took off the tax on new home builds. And that's kind of where it stopped. He's like, but we worked so fast and then we went on break. And that's why this fall we're going to be right back into it. He's making a lot of statements that the regular person's kind of like, huh? Okay, whatever. So that's when the CBC report got released. I'll say this. I'm Canadian through and through. I'm Canadian first. Hands down. I will never, and I don't ever, want to cheer for the failure of a prime minister because their failure is my failure. I want them to succeed. I want them to do well. But when you continue to lie and manipulate, and we find out you typically act in bad faith, knowing how much of that new biofuel announcement happen to have been aligned with your investments, how can I trust you? How can we as Canadians trust you? So when the CBC announcement dropped, it was fascinating. No oil pipeline on the list of projects of national interest because no private company has raised a finger so far to develop such a project. As Prime Minister Mark Carney's government prepares to announce the first projects of national interest it has selected, Radio Canada has learned that no oil pipeline is on the list. According to 3 sources that have spoken to Radio Canada, there is no pipeline project on the table, one of them said, despite the federal government's promise to make Canada an energy superpower. It's not the energy superpower that you think it's going to be. They're talking about another type of power. And they're not talking about what you think to be energy. Carney has never ruled out the idea of supporting the construction of a new pipeline. We have to choose a few major projects, not necessarily pipelines, but maybe pipelines. We'll see, he said on the French language TV show Tout le monde en parle during the election campaign. The Prime Minister, nevertheless, emphasized the importance of reaching a consensus with the provinces. Behind the scenes, a Liberal source insisted that the absence of a pipeline on the initial list does not mean that one will never happen. Approval of a natural gas pipeline project is also not out of the question. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has consistently expressed her desire to see an oil pipeline among the first projects approved by Ottawa. She particularly dreams of a pipeline that would connect the oil sands to northern British Columbia. Radio Canada reports Smith and her federal counterpart discussed pipelines earlier this summer. On that occasion, Carney was clear. The involvement of a private developer is essential for a project to move forward. So far, no company has expressed interest in financing or carrying out such a project. And this, my friends, is how politics goes, and this is how Mark Carney's going to operate. He doesn't really want a pipeline. And so there's a reason why he hasn't gotten rid of the bills that prevent pipelines from really being built. They essentially clog everything up with red tape and discourage the private investors, the private builders, from even applying to try and build a pipeline. This is how this is all going to go. This is how Carney's government's going to operate. They're going to promise, and then there'll be things left over that are preventing progress from happening. So when articles like this get published saying, no one's come forward, so I guess no pipelines are happening, they can just blame the private industry rather than blaming them not getting rid of the red tape that's in the way of these projects being built. This is why Carney refuses to repeal those problematic bills that Pierre Poilievre's been calling for, Danielle Smith's been calling for, and so on. The pipeline bill, the oil tankers, and the production caps. They refuse to remove those bills. This is why. No company will ever touch a pipeline in this country, especially after the last parliament with Trudeau running the helm, are ever going to touch our country when it comes to pipelines because of how bad faith our current government is. So when they know that those bills are still in the books, no one's touching this. But Mark Carney's going to look, he's going to point saying, sorry guys, no one's moving forward to build this. I wish we could. Guess we got to do something else instead. That's what's about to happen here. That's what this is. And CBC continued to report on it as well.
Rafi, let me ask you about what we're hearing from our colleagues at Radio-Canada. The government is preparing to announce its first national interest projects. Our colleagues at Radio-Canada have learned that there are no oil pipelines included on that list for now. Didn't make the short list. Can you explain the thinking behind that?
Yeah, interesting timing as they gather here in Alberta, right? But evidently there is no proponent for the project. So Liberal sources told Radio-Canada, well, if nobody's sticking their hand up to build the thing, we can't approve it right now. They're insisting, though, that this is, temporary. An oil pipeline could make its way onto the list in the future. So could a gas pipeline, for instance. And no doubt Carney will be having words with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith about this decision. They're set to meet later this evening. Smith, of course, is a huge proponent of pipelines. She's been asking the Liberals to get rid of Bill C-69, which is their environmental impact assessment legislation, which she says nixes the chances of any pipeline ever being built. The two leaders will meet at 5:30 Mountain Time this evening. They don't have any public availability scheduled after that meeting, so it will be at least one sleep until we hear from how that meeting went down and what they spoke about.
They lay it out there. Danielle Smith and Mark Carney are going to meet this evening in Alberta to talk about this. And I know that's going to be the top of mind for Danielle Smith. This is the announcement. No one's putting their hand up to build these oil pipelines. And Danielle Smith's going to be like, are you going to repeal Bill C-69? Are you? And that will probably be a huge point of contention in that conversation. We'll see what comes of it. But this is how the Liberal Party is going to operate. This is how, under Mark Carney at the very least. Trudeau was just a little too dopey, and he kind of always showed his hand all the time. That's why people got so angry with him. Mark Carney is still going to be doing what he's going to be doing, but doing it in a much smarter way to try and deflect any blame off of himself and continue to push his ideology of his green future and green grift. But we shift gears to Doug Ford. Again, it's been some time. He kind of went in hiding after that whole Crown Royal incident because, well, it was stupid. It was dumb. And he then came out this week saying, look harder, folks. This comes from the Toronto Star. It says, Doug Ford tells unemployed young people to keep seeking work. Young people who can't find work aren't looking hard enough, Premier Doug Ford said Tuesday, less than a week after Stats Canada reported Ontario shed 26,000 jobs in August, the most of any province. The remarks during a breakfast speech to the Toronto Region Board of Trade earned the Premier rebukes from opposition party leaders who accused him of being out of touch with a tough job market as President Donald Trump's tariffs take a toll on the economy. It drives me nuts when I see young, healthy people and they'll call me saying, I can't find a job. Ford told the crowd. I assure you, if you look hard enough, it may be in fast food or something else, but you'll find a job. Well, while Ontario's unemployment rate dropped to 7.7% in August from 7.9% in July, it was because fewer people were looking for work, Stats Can said. What an out-of-touch thing to say after what the federal Conservatives have been pushing forward on the temporary foreign worker program. Young people are struggling to find jobs because programs like our temporary foreign worker program or the international mobility program have been utterly abused, and it's causing for huge bottlenecks and issues for people here at home and for the people who are brought in from abroad. And for you, they have the audacity to sit there and say, you just need to look harder. No, how about this, Doug Ford? How about you work a little harder by pulling the plastic stopper out of a bottle before trying to pour it on live television, you moron? Obviously, it's a little different for me. I hate name calling. That one just kind of popped out, and I apologize. I pull that one back. But for real, how about you work a little harder and focus and realize what is happening around you right now? What Doug Ford is telling me right now, what it shows me, is he's a man who's not built for the moment. He doesn't really understand what's happening. He likes the TVs. He likes the cameras. He likes talking to live audiences because he likes to put on a show. But he doesn't hold anything of substance. Canada is facing one of its craziest times in our history because of poor legislation by a Liberal government over the past 10 years. And it's only getting worse. And I know that as a premier, your hands are tied to a point when it comes to federal legislation. But I compare Mr. Doug Ford to the likes of Danielle Smith, who carries herself with so much more class, poise, and certainty in the face of uncertainty. Doug Ford continues to panic, pander, and shows that he's not ready for this. He's not built for this. And he simply only reacts. He doesn't anticipate and then make a move on the chessboard. He's not thoughtful. He's not introspective. He's simply reactive. And he only got the vote of the Ontario people because you're going against horrible, horrible competition. That people are just like, I guess I got to vote for this guy. Sure, there's points where it's comedic to watch him, but otherwise, he's doing not a whole lot for Ontario right now, aside from gaffe after gaffe after gaffe. And when our young people are suffering the way they are, for him to turn around and say, just work harder, look harder. You're not doing enough. When a lot of these programs and a lot of these job openings are being filled by temporary foreign workers. Yeah, just look harder, Doug. Just look harder. That's the afternoon episode. There's a lot that's going to happen this evening, which are going to make for a loaded morning episode tomorrow. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.